Welcome. You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast, the show that cuts through the fog of war and updates you about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
Hello, I'm Marina Yevshan, your host of the Russia-Ukraine War Report podcast, and today is June the 6th, 2024. It has been 3,783 days since Russia started covert military operations in Crimea, 10 years and 107 days since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, and 2 years and 104 days since Russia expanded its war of aggression. 1 year ago today, Russian occupiers destroyed the Kakhovka Dam. Today's podcast looks at events that happened on Wednesday and Thursday morning. During the podcast, you will find the Russia-Ukraine war map helpful to visualize the areas discussed. A link is in the podcast description. There are only minor map updates today. The Russia-Ukraine War Report is compiled by our team from around the world. Today's report includes information from our direct contacts and journalists in Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Defense, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine morning reports, operational commands north, south and east of Ukraine, open source intelligence, our in-house team of analysts and geospatial experts, and pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian mail bloggers and social media channels with a track record of trying to be accurate. We have one mission, the truth, because the truth matters. Here is my daily assessment. There are only small changes from yesterday, so if you want to skip ahead, it won't hurt my feelings. I won't even know. 1. We maintain Russia's ongoing spring-summer offensive failed to achieve any of its operational goals after 46 days. 2. The sharp increase in aggressive acts by the Russian Federation directed at the NATO alliance and its member nations is a direct result of the failed policy of de-escalation and excessive fear of Moscow's tactical nuclear threats. We maintain the world is caught in the mutually assured destruction and stability paradox. 3. We maintain that Russia is setting conditions to commit further acts of aggression in Europe. 4. We maintain that autocrat Vladimir Putin's offer to negotiate a ceasefire based on the current line of conflict is not an overture made in good faith. It is meant to derail the upcoming June the 15th peace conference in Switzerland, which more than 100 nations will attend. 5. Russia's sustained attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, which has destroyed 95% of its thermal power plant capacity, are a continuation of Russian crimes against humanity that started in October 2022, as outlined in 2 arrest warrants issued by the International Criminal Court on March the 5th. 6. Ukrainian personnel shortages are extending deployment times, limiting troop rotations and forcing combatant effective units to maintain defensive positions, which is contributing to Russia's ability to make small tactical advances in some areas of operation. 7. Russian forces continue to exploit the delays in significant military aid from the US, the Czech Republic-led Ammunition Initiative and the European Union, carrying out at least 81 attacks on Wednesday and 110 on Tuesday. 8. We maintain that the quantity of artillery ammunition available to Ukrainian forces is increasing, but has not reached a level that will enable the stabilization of their defensive lines across the entire line of conflict. 9. Russia's trampling of international humanitarian law has been accelerating since March the 22nd. We maintain that the willful ignoring of blatant Russian war crimes by international watchdogs will continue to encourage escalation. 10. Autocrat Putin has started the largest purge of the Russian Ministry of Defense, led by the FSB, since Joseph Stalin's 1936 to 1938 purge. 11. In our assessment, there is almost no possibility of a large-scale Russian attack into the Sumy Oblast from Russia or the Kyiv Oblast from Belarus, and this is the last day for this entry. 12. The attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure have incrementally increased the chance of an intentional nuclear accident at multiple nuclear facilities in Ukraine. Missile strikes on the city of Kharkiv appear to have stopped for now, while Russia conducted numerous attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure. Overnight, Russia launched 18 Shahed-136 one-way drones at Ukraine, with 17 intercepted. One drone struck the city of Zaporizhia. At the time of recording, there was no other information available. During yesterday's drone attack, an industrial facility in the Poltava Oblast was struck, according to Filip Pronin, head of the Poltava Oblast military administration. One person was injured. In the Kharkiv Oblast, Russian shelling of Vovchansk wounded a civilian when the car they were driving was attacked. In a separate strike, a woman was injured by a drone-dropped IED. Russia also shelled the border village of Vovchansky Hutory, wounding a civilian. The settlement of Pivnichny in the Donetsk Oblast was shelled, killing one civilian and wounding 5. The VKS, that's the Russian Aerospace Forces, dropped 2 unpacked glide bombs on Selidove, injuring 1 person. Russia carried out a second strike on the night of June the 5th and the 6th, wounding 7 and damaging 13 apartment buildings. Vadim Filashkin, the head of the Donetsk Oblast military administration, said that Russian attacks on Bereztok, Zhelanne and Progress killed 3 civilians and wounded 9 more. The Ministry of Energy of Ukraine reported that a 21-year-old coal miner was killed in the Donetsk Oblast, related to damage caused by a Russian bombardment that knocked down overhead power lines. In the Kherson Oblast, Russia attacked a humanitarian aid distribution point in the village of Ingulets, wounding 2 men, 58 and 47, while they were waiting in line. Both were taken to the hospital. Overnight shelling killed 1 person and wounded 8 others, with artillery rounds, rockets, drones and glide bombs striking another 19 villages and settlements and the cities of Bereslav and Kherson. Russia struck the Nikopol rayon of the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast with artillery, rockets and one-way drones, wounding 2 civilians. Both were treated and released. The shelling damaged a 5-story apartment building, 15 homes, a library, a church and other civilian buildings. On the morning of June the 6th, a drone strike targeted a microbus, destroying the vehicle and wounding the driver and 3 civilian passengers. 4 days after a Russian missile strike caused critical damage to the Dnipro hydroelectric power plant, 1 lane of the roadway across the structure was reopened. A video showed there is severe damage to one of the spillway gates, further confirming that the attack violated Article 56 of the Geneva Conventions. Blackouts in Ukraine continue due to the dire state of energy infrastructure. Our team has asked me to share some first-hand information, provided that I am in Ukraine. So let me describe how the experience feels like. We have schedules of planned outages, where 3 possible situations are presented in a staircase-like layout: 2 hours with no electricity, 4 hours of so-called grey period, and 2 hours with electricity. If you're lucky, you get some or all of the grey hours as hours with electricity. But it's rare, as they are more prone to be added to the dark period. Furthermore, 2 hours of guaranteed electricity are usually squeezed to an hour or an hour and a half. In practice, it means the schedule is often like this: 6 or more hours of blackout, followed by 2 or less hours with electricity. Those are planned outages. There are also emergency ones. It means there's a chance that you don't get even your 2 or less light hours. And now let's see what it means to have no power. For a large part of population, no electricity equals no water. Think of washing, cleaning and watering plants in farming. There is no gas in multi-story buildings due to safety reasons, so for people living in apartments, it means no cooking during dark hours. Internet and cellular connection, GPS, are also a trouble. Obviously, electrical transport doesn't work either. And you get the idea what no electricity means for businesses. Some got equipped with power generators, like for example our internet provider. It means that as long as my family has power locally, we can have internet access. Private households can also install generators for their needs, but it's impossible for apartments. You can also think of accumulators like EcoFlow or Blue Yeti, but remember, you need to charge them somehow, and it's impossible if you have no electricity for a long time. I remember last winter we experienced a more than 3-day-long blackout, and there is no accumulator which could support 80 hours of consumption. One more solution is solar panels, but again, they are useless when the sky is overcast with clouds. And all the solutions I mentioned are rather expensive, as prices on EcoFlows and solar panels are high. Generators are also pricey and work on diesel and gasoline, which are not cheap. I know, and the whole world knows, that Ukrainians are resilient and creative, will survive. But the situation is far from normal. Here is today's action report. Russia's spring-summer offensive is in its 47th day, with 105 assaults carried out on Tuesday and, at the time my script was written, 81 attacks on Wednesday. Through June the 4th, the 7-day moving average for attacks dropped to 110, down from the May the 17th peak of 136. The number of attacks by Russian forces has been below the linear trend line since May the 20th. Russian forces continue to concentrate their attacks in the Ocheretine area northwest of Avdiivka, trying to break through Ukrainian defenses. Additional small gains were made in two directions. Heavy attacks were also ongoing northeast of Chasiv Yar. It is premature to declare that the Russian spring-summer offensive is coming to an end, and we believe that the increased operational tempo will continue through the summer. We continue to see growing evidence that critically needed ammunition is reaching Ukrainian frontline units, and the VKS has reduced the number of close air support missions across the theater of war. Speaking in St. Petersburg, Russian autocrat Vladimir Putin held a rare 3-hour-long press conference and appears to be going through some things. The Kremlin has repeatedly claimed that Western weapons are inferior, Russian air defenses are almost impervious, and Western military aid will not change the outcome of the Russia-Ukraine war. For someone who has said one way or another "I don't care" for over 2 years, the Russian autocrat appeared to be very upset over recent changes by Ukraine's allies. Putin threatened to sell weapons to regions in the world that could strike nations supporting Ukraine. The Russian leader told reporters, quote, "If someone thinks it is possible to supply such weapons to a war zone to attack our territory and create problems for us, why don't we have the right to supply weapons of the same class to regions of the world where there will be strikes on sensitive facilities of those countries?" Quick analysis. Since Russia expanded its war of aggression against Ukraine, it has failed to meet contractual obligations to deliver previously ordered weapons to several countries, the most prominent being India. Before 2022, India had a larger military budget than Russia and was Russia's largest customer. Russia is relying on Iran for long-range drones, North Korea for short-range ballistic missiles, and dodging Western sanctions to keep producing a reduced number of missiles. It's an empty threat. Putin warned Germany against sending Taurus cruise missiles while not mentioning them by name, saying that the action would, quote, definitively destroy Russian-German relations. Putin claimed he had spoken with United States leadership, telling them that if America stopped transferring weapons to Ukraine, the war would be over in 2 to 3 months. The Russian leader appears to have forgotten that the US suspended military aid to Ukraine for 7 months, and Russia only increased its attacks. One statement that Putin made that was grounded in reality was issuing a strong warning that if any Western nation strikes the Russian Federation, the actions would be considered a direct attack. I thought that was obvious to everyone, but now we know where the new red line is. The Russian leader then became visibly agitated, ranting at the Western media representatives. Let me start by saying, yes, he really said this. Quote, "There is no need to create an image of Russia as an enemy. You're only making things worse for yourselves. Do you understand this? You have imagined that Russia wants to attack NATO. Have you gone mad? Are you as dumb as this table is? Who the f*** came up with that? It's bullshit. It would have been a delusion if there wasn't an agenda to fool your own population. Saying, help, Russia will attack us soon and we have to arm immediately. We need to immediately send weapons to Ukraine. In reality, what are you doing this for? To hold on to your own imperialistic position of greatness. That's why it's being done." Unquote. And someone needs to change the sign, because it's been 0 days since a Russian government official threatened nuclear war. When asked by journalists about Russia's nuclear policy, Putin said, quote, "For some reason they believe in the West that Russia will never use it." Quick sidebar. Maybe because you threaten to use them more often than a desperate Bond villain? When asked about casualties, Putin had another brief moment of clarity, saying that no country would reveal that information during hostilities, and then went off the rails again. He claimed Russia had a 5-to-1 advantage, adding that Ukraine was losing 50,000 troops a month, with a 50-50 ratio of killed in action and wounded. For that to be true, Ukraine would have lost 1.35 million soldiers since February 2022. Wait, divide by 5, that comes out to 270,000 Russian casualties, according to Putin. He also falsely claimed that Ukraine only has 1,348 Russian troops in captivity, and Russia has 6,465 Ukrainians. We can't verify the exact number of Russian POWs held by Ukraine, but we do know it is significantly more than 1,300. Yes, one of our analysts went through 3 hours of Putin for today's podcast, and autocrats' visible frustration is enough to make you think that all is not going to plan. Now let's talk about what happened on the battlefield. There have only been small changes since the last podcast. Ready? Here we go.
You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. Our team of journalists, researchers, and analysts is funded by readers, listeners, and viewers just like you. To support independent journalism, please consider becoming a patron. You can find us on patreon.com/malcontentnews.
Starting in the Kharkiv Oblast, we begin in the Lipsy-Vovchansk area of operation, or EO. Ukrainian forces continued offensive operations in Vovchansk and made additional gains. In the north-central edge of the settlement, a Russian soldier who had been stuck behind Ukrainian lines for 3 weeks surrendered to Ukrainian border guards. Russian forces carried out 2 attacks north of Lipsy, with both failing. In the Belgorod region of Russia, Russian air defenses accidentally shot down their own Orlan-30 reconnaissance drone. The Orlan-30 is very rare and can provide laser targeting for the 152mm Krasnopol artillery round. In what may be the most bizarre story of the entire war, a video released by Russian state media showed the Russian Ministry of Internal Affairs chasing a Russian main battle tank south of Golovchina, near the Ukrainian border. The incident happened on the night of June 1st, after the tank ran over a civilian vehicle, killing at least 1 person. The tank was stopped by a police roadblock, and the crew was found to be drunk and was arrested. Yes, we link to that video in the situation report, and there is more information in the podcast description on how to become a subscriber. Fighting continued in the Kupiansk EO and became more concentrated. Russian forces attempted to advance on Sinikivka and toward Stepova-Novoselivka, suffered losses and retreated. In the Svatovo EO of the Luhansk Oblast, Russian forces carried out at least 9 attacks trying to advance towards Telmakhivka and from occupied Karmazinivka and Novovodyane. In the Kremina EO, Russian forces made another attempt to advance in the direction of Nevsk. South of occupied Kremina, 4 attacks in the Serebryanka forest were repulsed. In the Siversk EO of the Luhansk Oblast, Russian troops carried out another wave of attacks from Zolotarivka in the direction of Verkhnyokamyensk that were unsuccessful. Let's talk about the Donbass and the northeastern part of the Donetsk Oblast. Starting in the Siversk and Soledar areas, Russian attempts to advance in the direction of Vyimka and Rozdolivka were unsuccessful. In the Kostantinivka area, heavy fighting continued on the eastern edges of Kalinivka, with Russian forces carrying out 9 attacks. Fighting also continued on the eastern edge of the canal district of Chasiv Yar, with no change in the situation. Russian attempts to advance from Ivanivske also failed. Further south, fighting continued within the no-man's land of Klishchiivka and southeast of Andriivka. Russian forces probed Ukrainian defenses at the Siversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal Dam west of Kurdyumivka in the direction of Bila Gora. In the southwestern part of the Donetsk Oblast, the heaviest fighting continues to be in the Avdiivka area, with Russian forces carrying out 19 attacks. Assaults continue to be carried out from occupied Ocheretine in the directions of Novo-Alexandrivka, Yevgenivka and Sokil. Russian forces made marginal gains east of Arkhangelsk, and we adjusted the war map. Russian forces also made small gains in the direction of Novopokrovsk. Russian mercenary Melblogov Ogonzo claimed that fighting continued east of the Karlovsky Reservoir and Vovcha River in the direction of Karlivka, with no change in the situation. There continues to be significant fog of war in the Vuhledar area. Ukrainian source Deep State claimed there were new Russian advances in Krasnohorivka, while Ogonzo reported, quote, "The situation has not changed much either, fighting is ongoing." The Ukrainian 46th Air Mobile Brigade hasn't provided any update on the situation since May the 27th. Russian sources reported fighting continued east of Georgiivka, with no change in the situation. In the Staromlinivka area, Russian forces carried out 6 attacks in the southern part of Urozhaine, suffered losses and retreated. Our analysts were able to confirm that Ukrainian drones struck at least 2 oil facilities in Russia and likely hit a third. Multiple Ukrainian drones struck the Novoshakhtinsk oil refinery in the Rostov region, causing devastating damage. Russian attempts to conceal the situation using pixelated videos were hysterically bad, clearly showing that one distillation tower and the adjacent processing unit were completely engulfed in flames, reaching 150 meters into the air. The refinery was capable of processing 112,000 barrels of crude oil a day. NASA Fire Information for Resource Management Systems, or FIRMS, suggested that most of the facility was on fire and the flames had spread north and west of the refinery. Russian officials reported that plant operations were suspended. Based on the initial videos, in our assessment, it will take over a year to restore the facility. In the Krasnodar Krai, NASA firms showed there was a fire at the storage tanks next to the Slavyansk-on-Kubань oil refinery. There were no videos or pictures available to confirm the strike. In the Belgorod region, Governor Vyacheslav Gladkov reported that the oil storage depot in Starый Oskol was attacked by a Ukrainian drone, setting a fuel storage tank on fire. Here is my theater-wide update. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was in Qatar to hold talks with His Highness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani. Qatar has been acting as an intermediary in negotiating the return of kidnapped Ukrainian children and prisoners of war. Zelensky added that Qatar has been actively involved in planning the upcoming peace summit in Switzerland. Martin Dvorak, the Czech Minister of European Affairs, called on the Belgian presidency of the Council of the European Union to accelerate EU accession discussions with Ukraine and Moldova. 11 nations, including Germany and Slovakia, signed the letter. The Financial Times reported that the US was ready to move forward with providing Ukraine with $50 billion in aid through a loan backed by Russia's frozen assets. The Biden administration reportedly wants to finalize the agreement with the G7 nations at next week's summit. US news agency Politico reported that Ukraine is pressuring its allies to accelerate their training of F-16 pilots. Kyiv reportedly has 30 recruits qualified for training, but there are no available slots at any of the training facilities in the US, Denmark or Romania. And that's what we know. Your support of my home, Ukraine, helps us make history and protect the future for all.
You've been listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. To help keep us independent, please consider providing financial support by becoming a patron. Want on-demand news in your hand? Download the Google News app and make Malcontent News one of your favorites to receive breaking news updates. Thank you for listening.